So there's an old joke, one that Ronald Reagan used to tell himself, actually, about himself and Mr. Gorbachev, the former leader of the USSR. And it's about an American and a Soviet man arguing with each other, which country is better. And one of course, the American says, America's the best. And the Soviet disagrees. He says, the Soviet Union is the best country. And the American says, America is so great, you have no idea. We have this thing there called free speech. And the Soviet man says, we have that too. The American says, I don't think you do. I don't think you understand what that means. It means I can walk into the White House. I can take my fist, I can pound it right in the Oval Office on the president's desk, and I can say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running this country. And the Soviet says, we can do that. The American's shocked. What do you mean you can do that in the Soviet Union? You can go to the headquarters, you can go to Mr. Gorbachev's office, you can pound your fist on his desk, and you can say that? He goes, yeah, I could walk right in there. I can go, Mr. Gorbachev, I don't like how President Reagan's running his country. And the point of the joke is to illustrate something. Free speech only matters when it protects a minority opinion. Free speech protecting the way everybody thinks, the way everybody wants you to think, isn't anything. That's not really free speech. Right? As Rosa Luxemburg, the Polish author and 19th or 18th century, 19th century Yiddish leader, she once wrote, freedom is always and exclusively freedom for the one who thinks differently. Or John Stuart Mill, who said, if all mankind minus one person had one opinion, and only one person had the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing him than if he had the power, he would be justified to silence everybody else. Again, the point being, free speech is meant to protect the minority opinion. It's meant to protect the ideas that we don't like, because we don't need free speech to protect ideas that everybody likes and are easy to express and easy to say. And so I bring this up because the sermon I want to talk about, or the topic I want to talk about in place of the sermon I had written, was based on news I saw yesterday, just before Shabbat. It happened earlier in the day, but as I finally had a chance to look through my phone and flip through things, I saw an article and a headline that the author Salman Rushdie was stabbed before giving a lecture in New York. And last I heard was that he was in grave condition. He was at the hospital. I haven't heard updates since last night, so I'm not sure exactly where that is now. We pray for him and his well-being, as well for his friends and family. But I bring this up because of the story of Salman Rushdie, who many of you probably know, but just to back up a bit. He's an author, and in 1988 he published a book titled The Satanic Verses. It's an interesting book. If you've had a chance to read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I've had a tough time getting through it when I've tried. But nonetheless, it's a book. It's words. But it talks about some ideas that some in the radical fundamentalist Islamic community have found offensive. And in 1989, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, issued a fatwa called for his death, offering to pay money to whoever it was that carried out that act. And so for almost as long as I've been alive, Salman Rushdie has lived his life in fear. He has lived much of his life having to hide, having to not enjoy things that many of us take for granted, because when he goes somewhere, he has to go with the security team because of words, because of ideas that he expressed that some people didn't like. And it's interesting, because Judaism has a lot to say about words. We have a whole category of halakha, lashon hara, that deals with the words we use and what we should or should not say. And so many think that Judaism doesn't inherently support free speech. That Judaism says there are laws and rules about what you can and can't say. But it's interesting, because we have different types of laws in the Jewish tradition. There are laws that you can take someone to a Beit Din, a rabbinic court for. Laws of damages, for example. Contracts, business disputes. And there are some laws that don't have a rabbinic court. There's no rabbinic court for not putting on your tefillin. That's between you and God. There's no rabbinic court for eating pork. That's between you and God. Right? We'll talk about that when Yom Kippur comes. The court doesn't censor you for that. And the same with Lashon Hara. Our texts are clear. From the times of the Talmud all the way through the legal codes till today, there is no human punishment for Lashon Hara. That's something between you and God for you to deal with in the next life. Instead, actually, when the rabbis address issues of damages, they talk about what kind of injury it is. Can you humiliate someone with words? And they talk about different categories of humiliation, things you can do to another person that you could take them to a court for. So tearing their clothing, spitting on them, different acts of public humiliation that you can take someone to a Beit Din for. But they get to words. And their answer is, it's like spit that doesn't actually reach the person. There is no punishment for it. There is no claim. There is no damage that our court can put into figures and numbers to punish somebody for. Words are between a person and God. Right? It's codified in the Shulchan Aruch as even though one only embarrassed another with words, they're not fined. It's still, though, a great sin. And all who embarrass a person within Israel with words do not have a portion in the world to come. It's a strong condemnation of the words we use, but it's very clear. There is no human punishment for it. So the point of all of this is, I would hope that no one's written the article yet. But someday in the coming weeks, the coming months, the coming years, whether it's an editorial, whether it's somebody on a talk show host or a blog or a podcast, there are going to be people who are going to say, he brought this on himself. He should have been more careful. He should have been more culturally aware. He should have watched what he said. He knew it would inflame people. He knew going out there not recanting his words for all these years put him at risk. It was a choice that he made. But that's a disgusting line of reasoning. But we've seen it before. We've seen it with Ayan Hirsi Ali and the death threats that she's received. For a long time, she was listed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an Islamophobe. A woman who as a child was mutilated, fled child marriage to go to the Netherlands, and eventually came to the United States, speaks out against the treatment of women in the Islamic world because she herself was a victim of that, someone who escaped that, and she's labeled an Islamophobe. And she's told that the death threats that she brings them on herself for speaking out. She should be more culturally sensitive. We saw that with Theo van Gogh, the relative of the great artist Vincent van Gogh. Theo van Gogh was a Dutch filmmaker who in the early 2000s, 2004 I think, 2005, was stabbed and shot to death because of a documentary that he made about the treatment of women in some Muslim communities and countries. And again, there were commentators that said he knew what he was doing when he broached the subject. He should have done it more delicately. In France, when the offices of the paper Charlie Hebdo were attacked, again, it was all over. The question was debated, did they bring this on themselves? And so I bring this up before I see it, before I hear it about Salman Rushdie, because I think it's something important for us to remember. Free speech is a core value of any democracy. Free speech is a core liberal value. Free speech is a core Jewish value. It was Judah Loew, the Maharal of Prague, who said that to deprive opponents of religion of freedom of speech and opinion undermines religion, weakens religion. He understood many years ago that free speech is important to a society. But today we started to mix it up. We've lumped free speech with other liberal values together. We've lumped it in with the value, which, again, I'm not discounting these values, but the importance of caring about someone else's feelings. That's important. That is a central Jewish value, but it's separate. They are two and independent. We've lumped it in with other values, but it needs to stand on its own, because if not, it gets undermined, and that's a danger to all the other values that are based on it. In our Parsha this week, we read the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. You're probably aware the 10 Commandments aren't exclusively a Jewish item. Right? They're part of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, and they're part of the Old Testament and the Christian tradition. They're even in the Muslim world included in their teachings in the Quran. And different groups of Christians, different denominations, list the 10 Commandments in order and number them differently. Differently than the Jewish tradition, differently than the Muslim tradition, and differently than other traditions. What's the very first commandment? Who knows? Shout it out. I am the Lord your God. Anochi Adonai Elohecha. Be interesting maybe for you to know, the Jewish tradition is the only one that lists that as commandment number 1. For every other group, it's a prologue. It's not really a commandment, right? I am the Lord your God. It's not a commandment. Don't murder. That's the commandment. Don't steal. Honor your mother and father. Keep Shabbat. Those are commandments. Do this, do that. Anochi Adonai Elohecha. I am the Lord your God. What's the command in that? But the Jewish tradition holds, as you said, that's the very first commandment. And the Tzadok of Lublin, a Hasidic rabbi, explains there's a reason for that. He tells us that the first commandment is separated from the rest because it necessarily precedes it. Without knowing who God is and recognizing God, the other commandments don't work. The other commandments don't make sense. We need that foundation of why we are keeping them. And I want to say that this morning, that the same goes for free speech. It is a core central of democracy. It is a core foundational pillar of democracy. It is a foundation stone of any liberal system of values. And if we don't separate and acknowledge the importance of free speech in and of itself, regardless of whether we like or don't like what's being said, all the other values that we cherish become diminished. They lose their power, they lose their meaning, and they're all at risk, everything we've come to cherish. So with that, this Shabbat, I ask that we offer prayers of hope, prayers of healing for Mr. Rushdie and his family, and as well, we think about not just the words we should and shouldn't say, but maybe we also stand up and protect words we disagree with, because we need to protect all the other things we do care about. Shabbat Shalom.